Children love to play with any toy on wheels, so this farm playset features a tractor that pulls a wagon. A farm wouldn't be complete without animals. This one has horses, cattle, pigs, ducks, and dogs. The two boys and girls can either stand or ride the horses. Of course, there must be a fence to keep them all on the farm. If this set is as much fun to play with as it was to make, it will be a big hit.
I haven't done any toys for a while, and this is one I sold out over Christmas. Quick and easy farm tractor with animals. Quite a few pieces to it, but nothing difficult. And so since I need to make it at least one more to put back in stock, that's what we're going to be working on today. Okay, I took all those patterns, cut them out, and arranged them by size. The main body of the tractor is 3/4. There's two sides to it at 3/8 each. There's a bunch of 1/2-inch parts and some 1/4 and a few 1/8 parts. So I've got everything laid out. I've got all the holes drilled for axles. Those are 7/16 holes, telling me there's going to be a 3/8 inch axle for this, which makes sense for the size of the wheels that'll be on it. And so everything's set up as far as the pieces for the tractor, the wagon, and the fence.
For now, I set the rest of the patterns aside. Everything I have set up so far is on poplar because I intend to paint these pieces, but I'm going to make the people and animals from more colorful hardwoods and give them an oil finish. This is one of those places where you can use up some of those hardwood scraps you've been squirreling away. It doesn't matter what order I cut the parts in, but I already had a number 9 Pegasus modified geometry blade in the saw, so I decided to start with the 3/4 inch thick central part of the tractor body. I choose my blade size according to the thickness of the material, the hardness of the material, and the complexity of the pattern. For a complete discussion on this subject, I left a link to my video on blade size choice on the screen and in the description. I like to start cutting with straight lines when I can, so on this pattern, that was the cutout at the front where the axle assembly will be mounted. The board's edge was rough, so I didn't mount the bottom of the pattern flush with the edge. Instead, I'll cut the bottom of the tractor body with the scroll saw. This will only take a minute longer than if I'd first ripped the clean edge at the table saw. The dotted lines on the trailer hitch at the rear of the tractor indicate where I'll later drill a hole for a peg that will be used to pull the wagon with the tractor. Cutting this pattern is mostly a matter of following the cut line all the way around. For patterns like this, I cut right on the line, and the blade obliterates the line as I cut. On the initial go around, I cut past the radiator detail lines at the front of the tractor because they'll be easier to cut now. I can move in the open instead of maneuvering in the waste area. There are 8 parallel lines very close to each other. I cut one line, then the one paired to it, and then pivoted the workpiece to make the vertical cut connecting the 2 lines. This created 4 sets of indentations on the front of the tractor to give the illusion of a radiator. I'm done cutting the main piece of the tractor body, but I'm leaving the pattern in place because I have to drill that hole for the peg that couples the wagon to the tractor. That was the only 3/4 thick piece, so I'll move on to the 1/2-inch thick pieces next. I decided to leave the number 9 blade in the saw because this next series of parts didn't contain any complex cuts. If there hadn't already been a blade in the saw, I would have likely chosen a number 7 or even a number 5. I tend to choose the larger blade size when the decision is on the border between 2 sizes. A larger cut will cut faster and need less pressure to cut. My choices are based on my style of cutting and hundreds of hours of cutting. You may prefer to go with the smallest blade possible, and that's perfectly acceptable. My recommendations are heuristics or rules of thumb, not hard and fast rules. This first 1/2-inch piece is a rectangle, and I had already cut it from a larger board, so all the lines were close to the edge. That made it easy to cross-cut each end and rip each side to a final size. By doing these cuts in this manner, I avoided having to make a 90-degree turn at each of the 4 corners. This next board has 4 parts, 2 sides for the wagon and 2 sides for the tractor. All 4 parts have 7/16 holes drilled for the axles to pass through. Oops! Notice how the tension lever flipped up at this part of the cut? I double-checked that the blade was tight in the lower blade holder, then I flipped the tension lever back into place and started cutting again. I believe this happened because I put too much pressure on the blade. I tend to be heavy-handed on my blade pressure, and this happens from time to time. I didn't realize until I got to the glue-up stage, but the holes in the wagon sides were too large. There was a rare mistake in the plans. The larger rear wheels on the tractor will have a 3/8 axle, so a 7/16 hole is necessary there, but the wagon's wheels will only need a 1/4-inch axle, and these 7/16 holes are much too large. I'll remake these two parts later and make a note on the plans so this won't happen the next time I build this toy set. I cut these rectangles like the larger one for the wagon's bottom. Parts this small are awkward, possibly even dangerous to cut on the table saw. The scroll saw is not the best tool for cutting straight lines, but I can touch up the sides on the disc sander to remove any irregularities. I cut the tractor sides next. These had curved rather than right-angled corners, so I made this as one extended continuous cut. I drilled the pilot hole simultaneously with the axle hole, making the cutout for the side window next. Like the outside cut for this part, the window had curved corners. I started from the pilot hole, cut to the edge, and then made the long perimeter cut. I'll break a rule of thumb here and make the outside cut for the fence section first. The reason for making inside cuts first is that those cuts often weaken the piece, and you need the surrounding outside to hold onto while making those cuts. But this piece contains 3 fence sections, and it would be a little large to handle while making all those inside cuts. Also, this is 1/2-inch thick material, and those inside cuts won't appreciably weaken the piece. Each fence section is a good size to handle comfortably while making these inside cuts. The idea behind these fence sections is clever. After cutting them, I'll take them to the drill press and drill holes for 1/4-inch dowels. On one side, a dowel will be glued facing downward and extending far enough into a corresponding hole in the next fence section to hook the 2 sections together. These 6 sections can be arranged to form a straight line or at a desired angle to create a corral for the animals. I made the pilot holes at my drill press simultaneously with all the other holes needed for these parts. I cut from the pilot hole to the line, then followed the line around until I was back where I started. Then I did the same thing with the other 2 cutouts. I'll leave the pattern on these and then take them to the drill press to make the holes for the 1/4-inch dowels. The pattern shows where to place the 2 holes. One goes all the way through and the other part way, just enough to accept the end of the dowel from an adjoining fence section. I switched to a number 3 blade for the 1/4 and 1/8-inch thick pieces. All of those parts are rectangles or simple shapes. After I cut them, I removed the scroll saw tape and patterns immediately, since there wasn't any more machining to do on these parts. I don't have any tips for cutting the rest of these, so I'll skip to the next step. Now I'm coming to the most fun part of this project, cutting the animals. This is one of those places where I can use small pieces of wood left over from other projects and inject a variety of wood species into the toy set to make it more visually appealing. I found that the glue stick is the most efficient method for mounting these small patterns. These are inexpensive and available anywhere you can purchase school supplies. You spread the glue on the back of the pattern, then place the pattern on the wood. Sometimes these peel off easily when you're done cutting, but other times they require a bit of sanding. It's time to switch blades again, this time to a number 7 blade for the animal's 1/2-inch and 3/4-inch materials. As you can tell from this project, it's essential to have a variety of blade sizes on hand. My go-to blades are the Pegasus Modified Geometry blades. I recommend you purchase the blade assortment from Bearwood Supply to get started if you don't already have a supply of blades. Then you can replenish blades a few dozen at a time for the sizes you use most in your work. There are price breaks for purchasing blades in quantity. I'm a Bearwoods affiliate, so I'll leave a link to their website in the description. I receive a small commission on any items purchased through that link. I already drilled the eye holes for the animals. Through experience, I found that it's best to drill these before cutting because they're near the edge of the material. Sometimes, if you cut the shape first and then drill the hole, the drill bit wanders and tears out the side of the piece. The geese and dogs are cut from 1/2-inch maple and walnut respectively, and the rest of the animals, plus the people, are cut from 3/4-inch thick material. There's nothing difficult about cutting any of these figures, it's only a matter of following the line. I showed myself attaching the small patterns to the wood with a glue stick, but the horses and cattle are much larger, and I used scroll saw tape to attach them to a piece of 4/4 sapele. Sapele is in the mahogany family, and it has a rich brown color with a beautiful grain pattern that's brought out when I add an oil finish. I took the 6 fence sections to the drill press to get them ready to accept the dowel pins that will connect the fence sections. The plans called for 1/4-inch holes for the dowels, but mine were slightly larger, so I drilled the holes so that the dowels would fit snugly. The holes on the other side that will accept the dowel pin hinges are 5/16 inches in diameter to allow the dowel to move freely. These holes only go deep enough to allow the dowels to fit with some room to spare. I used scroll saw tape to hold these patterns to the 1/2-inch poplar while I was cutting them. With the holes drilled, I no longer needed the patterns in place, so I removed the tape and set the fence aside. I'm going to paint these white. The main part of the tractor body has a 3/8 part attached to either side. All 3 of the pieces have a 7/16 hole drilled through them where the 3/8 axle for the rear wheels will pass through. These holes need to align for the axle to turn freely. The 2 3/8 parts are relatively large, so I squeezed out a bead of glue on the side that would attach to the center part, and then I use an acid brush to spread the glue around the entire part. It's always a good idea to double check you put the glue on the correct surface before applying it. More than once I put glue on the wrong surface and had to let it dry before I could flip the piece over and apply the glue correctly. I added 3 clamps to hold the pieces in place while the glue dried, and then I noticed that one of the pieces had slipped and the axle holes weren't lined up. I removed the clamps, rearranged the parts, and then put the clamps back in place. That's the problem with F-clamps. When you tighten the screws, this can cause pieces to move out of alignment. Always check everything before you set the assembly aside to dry. I'll get started on the wagon while the glue sets up on that assembly. These plans are from toymakingplans.com, and several pages of assembly diagrams show precisely how the parts fit together. When I aligned the sides with the middle part of the wagon, I realized there was a problem with the sides before I started gluing. The wheels for the wagon are 1.5-inch diameter and will take a 1/4-inch axle. The holes in the sides were much too big, so I'll remake the sides, probably with 5/16 holes, and then put those parts together. These little 1/8 trim pieces go on the sides of the wagon's body, and I decided to eyeball their placement rather than measure where to put them. I put a little glue on the back of each of these, then pressed them in place. I don't think any clamping is necessary. I'll let these dry while I work on something else, and then I'll return to the wagon assembly to finish it. The first stage of the glue-up had plenty of time to dry, so I'll remove the clamps and move on to the next step. The next parts to add are the 2 sides that form the tractor's cab. I used a piece of 120 grit sandpaper to remove the little fuzzies and smooth some of the sharp edges. I purchased my glue in gallon bottles and used them to refill medium and small-sized glue bottles. This one initially held Elmer's glue, and the small tip is great for squeezing a bead of glue onto small parts. I use my fingertip to spread the glue around, and I only have glue on this section of the tractor's side that will be in contact with the tractor's body. This is white glue and it dries clear, but there's no need to put glue where it's not needed. The 2 parts have 7/16 holes for the rear axle to pass through, so those need to be lined up with holes in the tractor's body. I glued one side in place, then flipped the tractor over to attach the other side. It took a bit of juggling, which I didn't show here, to keep the tractor steady and the sides in place while I added the clamps, but with a bit of fiddling around I was able to complete this step. With the F-clamps in place, I flipped the assembly onto its bottom to add the roof. I first checked it for fit, which was okay, then reached behind me to access the small clamp rack hanging on the wall. I checked to ensure they would fit. They did, and then I applied a bead of glue to the top of each side. I placed the roof on top and used a small spring clamp on each side. These spring clamps are perfect for tasks like this. While the tractor assembly dries, I'll return to working on the wagon. I had no clue how to clamp the sides to the bottom of the wagon, so I just spread a glue bead onto the bottom of each side, put it in place, and let gravity do the work. When I held the front end up to see how it fit across the sides, I discovered 2 facts. The first was that the end was not quite wide enough or tall enough to cover the gap perfectly, so I decided to make a new piece with better dimensions. The second fact was that I could not glue the end onto the sides until that glue dried, so I set this aside until I could make a new piece. That brings me to the other part of the wagon assembly. You'll probably need to look at the construction diagram to see what I mean, but there are three parts to the lower assembly for the wagon. The middle part is horizontal, and at the front, a hole accepts a peg to hook the wagon to the tractor. Two sides attached to that, and each side has axle holes. These are the pieces I remade because the holes were too large for the 1/4-inch dowel rod that will be used for the axles. Attaching the sides to the middle piece was another awkward assembly. I couldn't figure out how to clamp it, so I added glue and let gravity do the work once again. I painted the wagon brown and the wheels flat black. I live in a rural area, and most farmers around here use John Deere equipment, so I painted the tractor John Deere green. The fence, of course, is white. The animals, boys, and girls are all completed with a child-safe oil finish that brings out the color and green of the wood and preserves it for many years of imaginative play. One of the great things about being a woodworker is having the opportunity to build long-lasting toys like this that encourage children to use their imagination. This project did not require difficult cuts, so you should have lots of fun cutting everything and assembling the tractor and wagon. As always, I love to read your comments and respond to every one. If you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you won't miss any future videos. But in the meantime, 2 suggestions for what to watch next are on the screen.